They thought they could buy her silence, but they didn't know what silence had been hiding. And when she finally spoke, her voice shattered decades of polished lies, not with screaming, not with rage, but with truth. Sharp, deliberate, undeniable. It began on a Thursday afternoon in Holloway City, where the streets hummed with heat and secrets, and nothing ever stayed quiet for long. Sunlight spilled like honey through the open balcony doors of a third-floor walk-up on Braden Avenue. Outside, the city stirred. Impatient horns, vendors cawing over the sound of jazz from corner cafes. But inside the apartment, time had softened. In the kitchen, Maya Ellis, 29, stood barefoot on cool tile, slicing lemons with a grace that came from years of muscle memory. Her curls were pinned loosely atop her head, her linen shirt cuffed to the elbows, revealing a tattoo of tiny stars on her forearm. The kitchen smelled of garlic roasting in oil, fresh rosemary, and something warm and hopeful. In the next room, Noah Grant, 32, sat cross-legged on a woven mat, flipping through an old poetry anthology. He wore a faded black t-shirt, his skin rich brown under the sun's soft glow. The slow curve of a smile played on his lips as he read a line that clearly stirred something. He chuckled to himself, low and unguarded. Their apartment was small, 2 rooms, creaky floors, mismatched furniture, but it pulsed with life. There was a chipped mug on the windowsill from their first road trip, a broken record player they'd repaired with too much glue and not enough skill, and a wall lined with sketches and snapshots, proof that memory and meaning didn't need symmetry. Noah glanced up. Lemon cake again? Maya smiled without turning. I need something sweet in the air today. You expecting company? He teased. She paused. They said they'd come. Noah knew who she meant. Her family. The ones who had RSVP'd without enthusiasm, who hadn't visited since their wedding nearly 2 years ago. He closed the book and stood slowly, walking over to her. I can head out if you'd rather. She cut him off gently, resting her forehead against his chest. No, I need them to see. Not just me, us. He wrapped his arms around her. Without another word. He knew better than to ask for reassurance. Her family had never made space for him. He'd stopped expecting it. Maya came from a world where dinner tables were quiet, unless discussing stocks or private schools, where smiles were trained and cutlery had rules. Her father, Richard Ellis, was an old money investor with silver hair and a stone jaw. Her mother, Margaret, curated charities like accessories. They hosted fundraisers and frowned at raised voices. Noah's world was the opposite. Raised in East Briar by a single mother who taught music at the local school, he grew up fixing things. Bikes, hearts, broken windows. He now worked at a community center, teaching adults how to read, helping teenagers fill out college forms. His shoes were always a little worn, his shirts often rolled at the sleeve. But his eyes carried weight and kindness that made people stop mid-sentence. They met in the poetry aisle of a bookstore downtown. Maya was sketching a woman. On the cover of a memoir, Noah asked her about it. She asked him about his favorite poet. They stood there for 2 hours, knees touching, talking like the world had finally allowed them to breathe. A year later, they were married under a sycamore tree in the city's botanical garden. No caterers, no harpist. Just 30 chairs, hand-picked flowers, and vows whispered through laughter and tears. Her parents had attended. They hadn't smiled. They arrived one bright Saturday. Margaret stepped in first, hair perfectly set, blouse ironed crisp, and a faint scent of jasmine clinging to her. She kissed Maya's cheek, missing by an inch. Richard followed, suit uncreased despite the heat. He nodded toward Noah and said nothing. Their shoes echoed in the small apartment. They took their seats on the balcony. Maya had set out glasses of hibiscus tea and slices of melon. A jazz playlist hummed in the background. The breeze carried the smell of garlic and rosemary, now layered with something sharper, tension. Maya spoke carefully, like walking across glass. She mentioned her new gallery submission, the success of Noah's reading program, their upcoming trip to Portland. Each compliment she gave her husband was met with either a flat, "That's nice," or the soft clink of her father swirling ice in his glass. Margaret eventually tilted her head. "You seem content," she said with a small smile. "Just be sure you're not mistaking comfort for purpose." Noah didn't blink. He'd heard worse with softer tones. But Maya's fingers curled tight around her glass. Richard spoke once about the parking. That night, after they left with forced goodbyes and untouched melon, Noah pressed a kiss to her temple. "Let me go grab takeout. You look like you need quiet." She nodded, silent. The letter came the next morning, no envelope. Just cream-colored paper, folded, precise. Typed, "Maya, we love you. We know you believe in what you've chosen. But please, consider the future. Consider your name. We are prepared to assist you financially, should you decide to make a clean break. $250,000, no judgment. No shame." Dad Maya stared at it for a long time. The paper was thick, expensive, no creases except the middle fold. The ink didn't smudge. It wasn't just a letter, it was a statement. A transaction, a valuation of her love, a buyout offer. And worst of all, they believed she might take it. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply set the paper down and looked at the life around her, the sketchbook on the table, the laughing photo in the hallway, the single rose Noah had left in a coffee mug 3 days ago. That night, she lay beside Noah as he read aloud from Baldwin, his voice deep and slow. She didn't tell him about the letter. Not yet, but something had shifted, in her chest, in her spine. And as she stared at the ceiling, counting shadows, she knew something her parents never would. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was gathering strength. The restaurant rose above the city like a monument, all glass and marble, shimmering in the twilight like it had something to prove. Perched at the top of the luxury Astoria Hotel, it wasn't just a place to dine. It was where the powerful went to pretend they were still in control. Maya had received the message that morning, short, sharp, and signed, "Dad, dinner, 7 p.m. Astoria, just us. Please come alone." No mention of what it was about. No apology for the letter they'd sent just 2 days before. The one with the number, the offer, the quiet threat dressed as concern. She hadn't responded. But she'd known, almost immediately, that she would go. Not to negotiate. Not to cry. But to understand what kind of people could put a price on love and expect her to thank them for it. And to give them an answer. Inside, everything gleamed. White linen stretched tight across every table like freshly pressed clothes. Silverware shined like it had never been used. And in the background, a violin whispered softly, playing music delicate enough to break. It was the kind of place built to remind you who belonged, and who didn't. Maya stepped through the revolving doors alone. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished floors, the sound too honest for a place full of secrets. A host, Inco. A perfectly tailored vest greeted her by name and led her through the maze of silent diners. Some turned their heads. Others didn't need to. They could feel it, that someone had walked in who wasn't trying to belong. She saw them near the window. Richard, her father, was sculpted into his usual armor. Charcoal suit, posture like steel, eyes fixed on a wine menu like it held secrets to the universe. Her mother, Margaret, wore pale blue silk, her earrings catching the candlelight. Her phone rested, face down, beside her untouched plate. Rachel, her younger sister, sat with her hair pulled back tight and her smile looser than usual. Maya approached, calm and unreadable. Margaret rose halfway, offering her cheek like a porcelain token. "Lovely of you to make time," she said in a tone that made the compliment sound like a correction. Richard didn't look up. "You're late." Maya sat down slowly, folding her napkin in her lap as she studied their faces. Were they here? To negotiate? To manipulate? Or simply to remove her, once and for all? A waiter arrived before she could ask. Richard ordered a vintage red, the most expensive on the list, without consulting anyone. Rachel asked for sparkling water. Maya declined entirely. Jamal's name wasn't mentioned. For the first few minutes they pretended. Talked about an art show in Paris, a friend's wedding to a Greek architect, a property investment that wasn't what they expected. Margaret's smile was tight. Rachel's laugh was late. Richard never met Maya's eyes. Then it happened. Her father reached into his suit pocket and slid a clean white envelope across the table. No introduction, no build-up, just quiet intent. Maya stared. "What is this supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. Richard didn't flinch. "It's a decision." Her chest tightened. A decision about what? He looked up for the first time. "We're giving you a way out. 250,000. No expectations, just a clean slate." Margaret leaned in. "This isn't to hurt you, darling. It's a course correction. A chance to realign before things become ... irreversible." Rachel added gently, "You've built so much, your art, your network, your name. We're not saying Noah is wrong. He's just not right for this world." Maya didn't blink. "A world of what?" she asked, voice edged. "Silk lies and silent dinners?" Richard answered flatly, "A world you were raised for, and one he drags you away from every day." The waiter returned, poured the wine. No one sipped. Maya's hands stayed under the table, gripping her dress like it might unravel. She spoke, quietly, almost disbelieving. "You honestly think this is love?" Margaret's hand reached out. Maya pulled back, just enough. Rachel sighed. "You know how we've always done things, discreetly, without scandal. This is no different, but something cracked." A dam she hadn't noticed holding back years. She saw flashes skipping. Class in high school, and her father's check to the school board that made it disappear. The college boyfriend she loved, quietly erased after they found out his parents were janitors. Her cousin Theo, who came out and was never again invited to Christmas. Money was their language, image, their god. And now they were trying to buy her silence the same way. Bury Noah like a secret, rewrite her life in clean lines they could understand. Maya picked up the envelope. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. The weight of it of them was already burning her skin. She looked up, calm and resolute. "I'm not a crisis that needs fixing," she said clearly. "And Noah is not some misstep you get to erase with a check." Richard's jaw moved, but his mouth didn't open. She stood. The chair's scrape was loud, a declaration. Rachel tried one last time. "Maya, please, just think." "I have," she said. "Far more than any of you. I've thought about what love actually is. About what matters." She laid the envelope back on the table, like dropping ash. She didn't touch her drink. She didn't say goodbye. And as she walked away, her spine straightened, her vision cleared, and her heart, though heavy, had never beat with more truth. That night, when she stepped back into the apartment, it smelled like cumin and roasted tomatoes, like safety, like home. Noah stood barefoot at the stove, apron slightly crooked, a Nina Simone record playing in the background. He turned with a soft grin. "Perfect timing," he said. "I made your favorite again," Maya smiled, or tried. "You always spoil." "Me?" He raised an eyebrow. "Naturally, you make it too easy." They ate curled together on the couch, the hum of a documentary playing low. After dinner, he read from Baldwin while she drew in charcoal, smudging her wrists. It was quiet. Soft, but not empty. Her laughter came slower that night. He noticed. He didn't press. Noah never did. He believed in silence that held, not silence that erased. Later that night, the apartment settled into stillness, the kind that stretches across ceilings and sinks into bones. Noah had drifted, off with a book resting loosely on his chest, its pages slightly fanned open like wings that had paused mid-flight. His breath came soft and even, a quiet rhythm that filled the space between lamp glow and shadow. But Maya couldn't sleep. She lay beside him, eyes wide, staring up at the faint cracks in the ceiling, her hands clenched beneath the blanket. In her purse, still zipped shut, the envelope waited, not loud, not moving, but heavy in a way paper should never be. It felt like it pulsed, like it breathed, like it was waiting for her to say yes. She turned on her side and studied Noah's face, the slow rise and fall of his chest, the gentle way his lips parted as he slept, the faint scar above his temple, a tiny crescent she remembered him tracing once, telling her he'd gotten it from falling off a bike when he was 10. She had laughed then, imagining a fearless little boy daring the world to try him. She reached out and brushed her finger gently across it now, barely grazing skin. What would life be like without this? The question tiptoed through her thoughts. She tried to imagine it, not in fantasy, but in realism. The silence, the invitations to art, shows her family would suddenly remember to send again. The polite applause, the vacations with cold drinks and colder stares, the slow reabsorption into a life of smiling while suffocating. It all felt staged, like living behind glass, like wearing someone else's name on your chest and calling it heritage. The next morning, the air was heavy with decision. Maya boarded the early train toward her childhood neighborhood, watching as the city peeled away to reveal rows of manicured order. When she stepped off at her old stop, it all came back in a rush, not like nostalgia, but like a photograph. You wish you could burn. The streets were wide and hushed, driveways lined with cars so polished they reflected the sky, bushes trimmed to unnatural perfection. It was beautiful, but it was cold. The kind of cold that came not from weather, but from control. She passed the school she once attended, the country club she had never felt welcome in. And finally, the house, the one with the brick facade, white shutters, and windows that never seemed to open. Maya walked up the front steps. The wooden porch creaked beneath her, a sound so familiar it felt like betrayal. The housekeeper answered the door, still the same one from years ago. Surprised but not resistant, she let Maya in without a word. Inside, time had paused. Every picture, every candlestick, every stitched cushion was in the exact place it had been a decade ago. The air smelled like lavender and faint judgment. Upstairs, Maya found herself in the attic. The walls sloped sharply, and the only light came from a small round window at the far end. Dust danced in golden slants. She found the box almost immediately, labeled Mother's Side Personal. Curious, she opened it. Inside were photos, old invitation cards, brittle receipts, and yellowed pages from a different century. And among them, one letter, delicate, folded too many times, worn soft like fabric. The handwriting wasn't her mother's. It wasn't familiar at all. She opened it slowly. The words inside struck her like air rushing through a door you never opened. You were the bravest woman I've ever known. I wish we had run. I wish you'd said yes. But I understand. The world back then wasn't ready for us. Still, I pray your granddaughter knows someday that you once loved someone who didn't match the mold, and that love was real. Maya sat down hard on the attic floor. Her hands trembled, but the letter remained steady. Her grandmother, the one everyone praised for her refinement, her elegance, had loved someone like Noah, and it had cost her everything. She had loved across boundaries, and the family had buried it like rot beneath fine flooring. History hadn't just repeated, it had waited. Downstairs, Someone was probably arranging flowers or polishing silver, keeping up the image. But up here, in Dust and Hidden Truths, something real had cracked open. For the first time since the envelope slid across that restaurant table, Maya knew exactly what she needed to do. That evening, the table was set. Not extravagantly, intentionally, just the way she liked it. A linen runner draped through the middle, plates mismatched and meaningful. Candles glowing inside old mason jars. The scent of rosemary and roasted chicken curled from the oven like a promise. But the air was wound tight, like a string stretched across the body of a cello waiting for the bow. Maya adjusted a fork, then a napkin, then stepped back. She wasn't anxious. She was focused. By the sink, Noah dried his hands. With a towel, eyes meeting hers. "Want me to open?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "No, this part's mine," he nodded once. Not approval, just presence. When the doorbell rang, the air shifted. Maya opened it to find them waiting, her parents, shoulder to shoulder in their carefully curated composure. Her mother's smile was just a little too polished. Her father's nod too brief. Rachel lingered behind them, holding her purse like a shield. Noah stepped forward and offered his hand. "Good evening." Her mother nodded slightly. Her father acted as though nothing had been said. Rachel whispered, "Hi," under her breath. They sat. Conversation danced around anything real. Compliments about the lighting, complaints about the traffic. Rachel scrolled under the table, pretending she wasn't. The wine remained untouched. When Noah served the main course, Maya cleared her throat. The room froze. "I asked you here," she began, her tone smooth but unwavering, "because something needs to be said." Her father leaned back slightly, fingers laced. "We figured. I'm glad you're taking time to reflect." Her mother gave a small nod. "We know change is uncomfortable, but sometimes it's necessary." Maya reached beneath the table and pulled out the envelope. She placed it carefully in the center, pressing her fingers to its surface. She didn't speak right away. Then she looked up and said, "This was your solution, your version of love." Silence. "You really believe love has a price?" Maya's voice sliced through the silence like glass breaking. It was calm, but sharpened at the edges. Her father shifted, mouth parting to speak, but she lifted her hand. "No," she said firmly. "You've spoken. Now you'll listen." She turned her gaze to Margaret first. "You smile at him when he walks into the room, but you don't see him. Not once have you asked about his work, what drives him, what he dreams of. You only see what doesn't fit into your mold." Her mother blinked rapidly. The corners of her mouth twitched, just once, then stilled again. Maya didn't wait. She turned next to Rachel. "You said this was about my future, but let's be honest, you meant your comfort. You've always mistaken acceptance for success. But what you call love—" She paused, letting the words land is just obedience dressed in silk. Then she faced her father. Her eyes didn't waver. "You speak of protecting me, of giving me another path. But what you offered wasn't protection. It was a transaction, a buyout. You tried to put a price tag on my silence, on my heart, on my dignity." His jaw tightened. "That's not." "It's exactly what it is," Maya cut in, her voice sharp now, rising just enough to silence him. Noah stood in the doorway, arms crossed, silent. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His eyes never left her, not filled with pride, not expectation, just steady, grounded presence. Maya inhaled, then continued. Her voice softened, but her spine stayed straight. "You see him as a threat, not because of what he's done, but because of what he is. He challenges the picture of the world you've spent decades framing, and you can't bear the reflection he casts back at you." Her mother's lip trembled. A single tear rolled neatly down her cheek, catching light but not smudging mascara. Rachel turned her head. unable to meet her sister's eyes. Richard stood slowly, straightening his posture like that alone could restore control. "This is all dramatic. You're overreacting." Maya rose too. "No, what I did was stay quiet for years. I let your rules shape my tone. I let your eyes tell me how to enter a room. I smiled through every dismissive comment, every loaded silence." She stepped forward, but not anymore. And then, with fingers that didn't tremble, Maya picked up the envelope. She tore it, clean in half, then again, until the pieces fell like white confetti across the tablecloth. Noah moved, slowly, silently, not to speak, but to stand beside her. His presence wasn't loud, it was steady, it was with. The silence in the room changed. Richard adjusted his cufflinks with unnecessary focus. Margaret dabbed at her eye with a napkin folded like origami. Rachel hovered near the doorway, arms folded, gaze locked somewhere far beyond the walls. Nobody touched their wine, nobody spoke. They weren't storming out. They were retreating, leaving not in rage but with the bitter realization that their influence, once unquestioned, had just dissolved. Maya didn't sit back down. She stayed beside Noah, shoulders square, breath shallow but sure. Then a sound cut through the tension like the first drop of rain before a monsoon. I remember when I had to make a choice. Everyone turned. At the far end of the table, nearly forgotten, sat Aunt Eleanor, her mother's aunt. Her back was straight, her hands folded, gently in her lap. She hadn't spoken all evening, offering only polite nods and the occasional sip of tea. She was often treated like furniture at these gatherings, quiet, always present, rarely noticed. But her voice now held the power of thunder. Maya blinked. "Aunt Ellie?" Eleanor nodded slowly. Her pale blue eyes were sharp, not faded by age, but focused like morning frost. Her silver hair was pinned back neatly. Her voice was gentle, but carried weight. "It was 1956, she began. His name was Thomas." A wistful smile touched her lips, haunted, but true. "He was brilliant. Played the piano like it was part of him, and he made me laugh. In ways I didn't know I needed." Rachel looked stunned. Margaret sat frozen. Maya waited. And the room listened. "I brought him to one family picnic," Eleanor said, her voice quiet, steady. "Just once." All eyes shifted to her, the elder at the end of the table, the one so often forgotten amid the clatter of voices and pride. No one said a word to his face, of course. "But the next morning, your grandfather sat me down," she continued. "He told me I had a decision to make, the future or my heart." Her voice wavered. She paused, her gaze drifting for a moment to a place decades away. "I chose the name, the money, the house, all of it." She let out a short, bitter laugh. "But I can still hear it." The sound of the screen door slamming behind him as he walked away. Silence fell like snow. Not cold, but heavy. This wasn't the silence of discomfort. It was the kind that arrived when buried truth finally dared to rise. Eleanor's eyes met Maya's, and though her hands trembled in her lap, her voice carried with quiet force. "Don't let them carve you into someone you no longer recognize," she said. "Don't let them take from you what they took from me." Maya's breath caught in her throat. Eleanor stood. Slowly, but with a grace that came not from poise, but from clarity. She walked the length of the table, stopping beside Noah. Then, without a second's hesitation, she wrapped her arms around him, not politely, not formally, fully. Her arms shook as they held him, and Noah, startled at first, slowly returned the embrace, gentle and sure. "I never got to say it back then," Eleanor whispered, just loud enough for the room to hear. "But I'm proud of what I see in you, and proud of what she's chosen." A tear trailed down her cheek. And just like that, the air changed. The silence no longer felt hollow. It was full now, full of honesty, of weight, of something far more powerful than power itself. On the table, what remained of the envelope fluttered in two clean halves. A corner of the check peeked out, stripped of its illusion, finally just paper. Margaret looked down, stunned. Richard clenched his jaw but didn't move to pick it up. Rachel looked away, her lips pressed together in something that resembled shame. Maya stood still, but taller now, as if something had finally clicked into place. 1 week later, their home overflowed with color, laughter, and light. String lights twisted across the ceiling like stars strung just for them. Paintings leaned against every wall, some Maya's, bold and unapologetic. Others belonged to neighbors and friends. Children's drawings, chalk-on cardboard street art, charcoal sketches that screamed with truth. Jazz echoed from a corner, played live by an old man on keys while a teenage girl recited poetry between songs. The kitchen was alive, Noah wearing his flour-dusted apron, stirring stew and cracking jokes while guests dipped bread and shared stories. It was chaos, glorious, loving chaos. Eleanor arrived early, walking slowly but smiling as if time had turned tender. She carried a photograph, black and white, its edges worn, of Thomas, the pianist. Maya placed it in a wooden frame by the door, where everyone could see. "I think he'd love this," Eleanor said. Maya nodded, voice warm. "He's finally part of the story again." Later that night, after the last dish was dried and the final laugh echoed into memory, Maya and Noah climbed onto their fire escape. The city pulsed below, car horns, distant sirens, music from a nearby window. It wasn't quiet, but it was peace. She leaned into him, fingers laced with his. They said nothing, because what they'd built, in the face of fear, tradition, and silence, spoke louder than words ever could. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't wealth or status. It's the courage to break the silence, to choose love over legacy, and to live truthfully in a world that rewards performance. The past doesn't have to define you, but it can. Teach you exactly who not to become. If this story moved you, or made you think of someone who needs to hear it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. We tell stories that speak truth louder than tradition. See you in the next one.